Hi! This time I'm going to continue with my series of scary videos for this month of October. You're going to find the playlist for the other videos in the description. This time I am going to talk about some indirect horror hazards or sources, which are caverns, tunnels, and alchemical substances. I'm also going to put a couple of links in the description to my other two videos where I talk about alchemy. I would consider very useful or helpful if you watch those two videos first in order to understand what I'm going to talk about alchemy, if you are not familiar with alchemy, that is. Before we continue, I would like to talk about this channel's sponsor, Heroes and Hardships. The Kickstarter has already begun. This is a universal RPG system, allowing you to play any sort of adventure, campaign, genre, story. You can also create any sort of character imaginable. You have hundreds of tools to accomplish that. I'm going to put links to the Kickstarter, to the website, to the Discord, to the Tetsubo section of the website. Tetsubo is an upcoming setting based on Japan's Sengoku era. I'm also going to put links of my reviews of the core rulebook in its early access version, my reviews of the Quickstart guide and the Wallace campaign setting based on the life and exploits of William Wallace, so please check it out. Okay, let's continue. Let's start with cavernscapes, tunnels, and all of that. I've seen plenty of adventure modules throughout my life, or at least my RPG career, that do not put enough emphasis or importance when it comes to these dangers in caverns and tunnels. I think there are some specialized books that perhaps touch upon the subject. I have one. It's I forget the name. It's a book written by Patrick Stewart. I haven't given it a full look through. I have just read a bit of it, but it looks very realistic when it comes to the details of the formation of caverns and such. So I'm also interested if that book contains some details related to hazards. But when it comes to adventure modules, campaigns, I don't think there is enough importance placed upon the dangers of spelunking and caving and going in underwater tunnels as well. I'm going to put a few links in the description to channels that have videos concerning that. Very interesting. Okay, let's start talking about dry caverns, caves, and tunnels. I think that many players are not aware, because unless they dedicate themselves to caving, they are not aware on how fragile sometimes the ceiling and the walls of the caves become. There have been deaths caused by pieces of the ceiling of the cavern that just drop from out of nowhere and for no apparent reason, because the earth, there are always some subtle tectonic plate movements. So sometimes just pieces of the walls or the ceilings, they just dislodge themselves and they fall on people, breaking their necks, injuring their heads. So that's a very scary prospect or consideration when you are going into a cave or a tunnel. You never know if something is going to cause the ceiling to collapse a bit. In role-playing games, you can handle this by making some rolls. Perhaps there is a percentage chance of something falling on top of your character, but it could also be related to the things that you are doing inside the cavern or the cave or the tunnel. There are some trigger-happy spellcasters. Sometimes they are using these explosive spells all the time, and when compared to real life situations, it only requires that sometimes groups of people, because of the heat that they generate when you have a large group of people, and because of the noise, perhaps they are building some fires, some campfires, that causes important changes in temperature and moisture as well. So sometimes the floors, the ceiling, the walls of the cavern, they become quite weak, potentially because of the heat, changes of cold to warm and vice versa. Sometimes they become a bit muddy. Sometimes moisture that has been stored just behind the layer that the characters see, or the people in real life see, rather, the moisture starts to sip, or it flows towards the area where the characters are moving through, and things start to become quite muddy. There are some horrifying situations. Recently, the internet historian made a really well detailed video about a rescue attempt, and in one part of that video, the ceiling of the cavern is actually collapsing, just like those, like Indiana Jones type of situations where you see that the ceiling is kind of like almost like squashing the character. It's quite terrifying how just a few changes in temperature and moisture and all of that, and the vibrations of the planet itself, it causes that unexpected hazard. But there are some other less obvious things. In role-playing games, you are quite used to just moving through some narrow corridors and tunnels, some tunnels rather in this case, without thinking that it could be actually quite lethal. For some tunnels, when you need to squeeze through some areas in real life, cavers need to, draw their breath in. They need to pull their stomachs and their chest inward so that they become a bit thinner, and that way they can move through those narrow passageways. But if you lose that concentration, if you don't have good physical condition as well, maybe you simply cannot hold your breath any longer, or you cannot keep your chest or stomach from expanding. And if that happens when you are halfway through, it could cause you damage to your organs, to your bones. You could end up crushed. So there have been some situations where people have gotten stuck or injured, I think also killed, because of it puts too much pressure on their chest. It's obvious you're moving through a narrow space or tunnel, and you are just trying to compress your chest as much as possible, and suddenly it expands. It can break your bones potentially. It depends on the situation. So when a character moves through those narrow spaces, be it a non-player character or a player character, it could be a good idea perhaps to make a constitution check or things like that to see if the character moves safely through that section. Or maybe you take damage, or maybe, depending, maybe you end up killed or completely stuck. There are also some areas that have this funnel type of effect. So yes, it's definitely quite risky, putting aside the dangers related to the temperature. Sometimes some caves, depending, they are too cold or too warm or hot, and that could cause death by exposure. Now let's move on to underwater tunnels. These are quite scary, and I've seen so many adventure modules where the characters are moving through one tunnel that connects one room to another, one cavern to another cave and such, and they just go in with no problem at all. They move through the underwater passageways as if it was the easiest thing in the world. And many of you are already familiar with this, but just in case somebody hasn't thought about this, but there is the problem of silt. The ceilings, the floor, the walls of those underwater tunnels, they are so brittle. You have these little pieces that chip away from the surface. So if you swim too carelessly, too violently, this silt just starts covering everything in the water. The water becomes this sort of like a thick soup. You cannot see in front of you. You cannot see your hands. You're completely blind underwater. And this is quite disorienting. You cannot find your way through the tunnels. There have been many deaths because experienced divers, both rookies and experienced divers, they have got in that situation. They couldn't find their guide rope, or they simply could not tell where was up and where was down, and how they could navigate their way through the tunnels, and they end up dying because they run out of oxygen. If you are lucky, maybe there are some pockets of air, of oxygen, but some other pockets are deadly. They have carbon dioxide, and you end up dying. You think you are taking a good breath of oxygen, of fresh air, and you end up inhaling that toxic gas. So yes, there are many dangers associated to navigating those underwater tunnels. And added to that, imagine if you put some enemies to attack the characters while they are going underwater inside of those tunnels. The silt is guaranteed. All of that uh, dirt or things that chip away from the walls, ceilings, etc., they are going to make fighting quite impossible. You're going to take some heavy penalties. So suddenly, the prospect or idea of moving through those underwater tunnels becomes deadly, absolutely deadly. Even if there are no enemies or traps or anything, just making your way safely through those tunnels, especially if there are several exits and entrances to dead ends, leading to dead ends. Yes, it's not that easy. But like I said, if you want more examples, please check out the channels that I'm going to put in the description. There's a lot of inspiration for dangerous adventures and hazards when it comes to navigating dry or wet tunnels, caves, caverns, and such. Now, moving on to some alchemical dangers. I want to remind you again, if you do not know what alchemy is, that is outside of fiction, if you do not know that alchemy is actually a real discipline, a combination of art and science, please check out my videos in the description. Alchemy is used quite frequently in many fantasy role-playing games, even some low fantasy role-playing games. It is handled as a sort of science that is sometimes unpredictable. This has a basis in real life. You could fill the same laboratory with several so-called alchemists, and you could give them the same materials, the same reagents, ingredients, etc., but they wouldn't obtain the same results. Perhaps the entire lab of alchemists, they all fail perhaps, or maybe just a few succeed. That's why alchemy isn't so explored when compared to chemistry. Chemistry is quite predictable. You may remember from those alchemy related videos that chemistry was actually born from alchemy. They were the puffers, they were sometimes the assistants or those that wanted to learn alchemy. They couldn't master alchemy, but they learned some what you could call the superficial aspect of alchemy. Chemistry is actually surface level alchemy. But when it comes to alchemy, there have been these miraculous substances, and they depend quite a lot when it comes to the spiritual development or unfoldment of the practitioner. That's why you could have an entire laboratory filled with alchemists, and only a few manage to create a particular tincture, or depending on the material that you are working with. So when it comes to hazards, there are some... Oh, and just in case if you don't think that alchemy is possible to be carried out as a practice, although you can find books of alchemy everywhere. Amazon has so many books about alchemy that you can practice yourself. You could take this as just like fictional material for your role-playing games, which is the purpose of this video. So when it comes to hazards in alchemy, the more basic alchemical experiments, they are quite safe. You work with pretty much any herb that could be used in a tea. So it's perfectly safe and the results are somewhat easy to obtain. But as you advance in levels, in mastery of alchemy, you start to work with very dangerous substances. That's one of the obstacles when it comes to working alchemy in current times. Some of those substances are not that easy to obtain. Some of them could be considered illegal in some places depending on the monopoly of pharma or the government in different places. And there is also the problem that a lot of people are stuck in materialism, in Marxism. They want immediate satisfaction. So there aren't many alchemical or practitioners or alchemists in current times. So going back to the hazards, like I said, some of those substances are very poisonous. Because in alchemy, it is well known that the sometimes the strongest poisons or the most toxic substances hide the most miraculous cures. But you need to know how to work, how to modify, how to carry out that transmutation of those substances. So that's one of the dangers. What if the player characters encounter this alchemical recipe during their adventures, promising something amazing like perhaps you can raise your attributes or stats astonishingly? Maybe you can obtain some magical powers or some sort of foresight or special knowledge because of the effects of the alchemical substances on your body. But then you could add some ingredients that could cause the instant death of a character, or perhaps affect the attributes or stats negatively. It depends on how severe you want to be with handling those situations in your RPG sessions. Because there are some very interesting effects when it comes to alchemy. Those of you that are students of alchemy, well, you need very little introduction to this. But for those that haven't done some research when it comes to alchemy, you're going to see this in occult circles or in obscure books. You're going to see these reports that, this woman in the Middle Ages or in the Renaissance, she was plagued with these parasites and nobody knew what exactly it was, because many alchemical remedies are supposed to heal anything. For example, the much sought after philosopher's stone. So even some of the lesser remedies or tinctures, they supposedly have you with a few drops. In the case of that woman that I am telling you, her breasts were infested with these worms and parasites, and with just a few drops of a particular alchemical substance, she was completely cured. Her skin regenerated, all of the parasites died, and she was healed in a day or so. So you have those miraculous substances. There are some other more extraordinary effects according to the alchemical texts, that this substance can actually regenerate parts of your body. That is, for example, maybe somebody is missing a finger or something, they can regenerate that. I don't find that too hard to believe. There is some incredible healing potential when it comes to the human body. And a lot of people that want to profit from you, they do not want you to know about this. You know how, I don't think this is a touchy subject, considering I've seen other videos. For example, the toothpaste. Toothpaste with fluoride it's basically what destroys your teeth. That's why dentists promote it, so that you ruin your teeth and you have to keep going all the time, and they have a steady source of income, a customer. Terrible people. But if you use natural means or simple means to wash your teeth, for example, my favorite way of brushing my teeth, would be combining apple cider vinegar, organic apple cider vinegar, with the mother. Add a few drops to baking soda, and you just brush your teeth with that. Once a day is enough. It's very powerful, and your teeth are going to be looking pretty good. When I was much younger, I actually chipped that tooth, and I learned about this remedy that you wash and boil eggshells, and then you powder them and you eat them. And after like 4 or 5 months, my tooth had regenerated. And they teach you that no, it's impossible, you cannot regenerate. That's all lies. So it's no surprise, or I think it's quite possible that some of the more obscure alchemical substances, they could regenerate parts of your body. I don't think that's impossible. So going back to that, there is actually a particular tincture. If you want to learn more about that, you can search online. I don't want to say the exact name because this is not about promoting some potentially dangerous operations, but those who want to find the truth and carry out the experiments, you just need to dig a little bit. And like I said, there are so many books about alchemy everywhere. But this particular tincture, supposedly, once you drink it, if you have done the process correctly, your nails are going to fall off. Your teeth are going to fall off. All of your hair in your body, in your head, everywhere else, it's going to fall off. So you're going to be thinking, what? That's horrible. But here's the thing: if you did the process correctly, the nails, the teeth, and the hair is going to grow back in a more healthy, healthier, more beautiful way. Supposedly you have so much health after that yes, it's like you were born again. Everything in your body is restored, and it's very how would you say, intriguing. It's very intriguing because that tincture is supposed to be inferior to the philosopher's stone. So it really makes you think how powerful the philosopher's stone actually is according to the alchemical texts. In your role-playing game sessions, you could play around with this to create some horrifying situations. Maybe you put this recipe or scroll or parchment or whatever describing the alchemical process, and now the characters, either if they want to take it as a main quest or a side quest, they are gathering the ingredients or the substances. Maybe they have to fight for some substances. You can make up anything. You don't need to follow the exact alchemical recipe. You could perhaps put some gemstones or magical items that are very difficult to obtain in your setting, in your game world. So that way the characters have to go to different adventure sites to look for those substances or material or reagents. But what if you don't tell them that your character, before obtaining those benefits, that maybe the character's hit points go up or the attributes go up or whatever, maybe they start to suffer penalties as they are taking the substance before they actually just obtain the benefits. Maybe their stats go a bit low. They start to suffer penalties to their skill rolls, to their saving throws, and so the players are going to get quite scared. They're going to think, this is going to be the end of my character. So I think this is a horror situation that, well, potentially horrific, that should be more impactful if you use it with characters that have already leveled up quite a bit, characters of level 5 and above, because players don't want to lose their characters. You could also put some hints to add further dread that if the process is carried out incorrectly, they cannot even be brought back. They cannot be resurrected from the dead. So now they are thinking, if my character takes this substance and the substance doesn't work, or I messed up something in the process, then my character is going to end up dead permanently dead, and the cleric or priest or whatever you have in your setting won't be able to resurrect the character. So you can play around with those details. Perhaps it's not something directly connected to the stats or the attributes or some mechanical elements or aspects of your player character. Maybe it's something that just changes the body quite a bit. Maybe the color of your skin starts to change into very weird colorations, perhaps with purples and yellows and reds, and so the player feels very worried about the character. Maybe one of your hands shrinks, or yeah, like I said, or maybe a leg starts to shrink and now you need to have like a peg leg, and you are thinking, this substance is going to be the death of my character. So, but if they continue with the process, if they only manage to survive a few adventures with those penalties, then they actually, perhaps they obtain many experience points, they level up quite a bit. Maybe, like I said, all of their attributes go to 18 or perhaps 20 in a d20 based system. Perhaps they obtain some magical or extraordinary power. Maybe they become immune to diseases, to poisons. It could be anything that you want to handle. So that's a good way of scaring the characters while potentially rewarding them, or scaring the players about their characters and rewarding them if they manage to create the correct alchemical potion or tincture or anything. Or a particular stone. Maybe they are questing for the philosopher's stone. Who knows? And yes, if you want more information, just take a look at different alchemical stories. I don't remember the name. It was one of the physicians for one of the French kings. He actually attempted the tincture that I was telling you, but he got scared. His nails started to fall off, his hair as well. So he stopped the entire process and he was always left with the doubt, or just if wondering if he was actually going to obtain the miraculous effects of the alchemical tincture, if he had just gone a bit further. I think he also gave the substance to one of his mates that was quite old, and she was how would you say, going through some changes that only a younger woman would experience, but she also got scared. This was also used on chickens, and the chickens, they actually lost all of their feathers, and then they had these beautiful feathers coming out instead. So yes, I find it a bit interesting that that alchemist didn't try it again based on the results of the chickens. But maybe, like I said, maybe it was such a scary prospect or possibility that he would end up with teeth and without hair, and without nails for the rest of his life. So yes, well, I hope this cavern and tunnel and alchemical related situations and events and properties and whatnot are helpful for some horrifying adventures. A lot of players are not going to be expecting the hazards that I mentioned about caves and tunnels. Remember to check out the links. And those players that know very little about alchemy, perhaps only alchemy as presented in video games or role-playing games, they could also end up quite scared when it comes to the process of the tincture that they are preparing or something like that. Well, thank you for watching this video. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know. Thank you for your comments and questions. I always enjoy reading them. And thank you so much to those of you that are going the extra mile to support the channel. If anyone else wishes to further support the channel, the information on how to do that will be in the description below. Once again, thank you, and I think that my next video is going to be one of the more unusual ones. Very unusual video. In fact, this particular subject that I want to keep as a surprise actually resulted in the shutdown of a channel of a very mysterious Russian guy. So once again, thank you, and see you later.